Hey, good morning, Blair. Good morning, Jennifer.
Morning.
Text me if you get a chance. We'll wait a second while some other people join us. It's interesting to do this without Tara. It's also far more challenging to do it without Tara. We sort of play off each other when we're teaching or talking together, so it's a lot of fun. And we're taking some turns while we manage life, manage families, and manage our kids and other things as we go along. So some days it'll be Tara alone here, and some days it'll be me alone, and on the really organized days, we'll both be here. And as we wait for other people to join us, good morning, Tim, Kevin. As we wait for other people to join us, I'd like to just start with a review, just a check-in and a review. And, text me or put a message in the live, the Facebook Live, if you've used the break state using your telephone number, your mobile number, seeing it up on a billboard in colors. What colors does your number appear in? I used it this morning. Before I got into my morning routine, into my Wim Hof meditation, I had some stuff come up around email, and I got agitated, and I actually had to take a moment and look up and see my billboard, and I smiled, and then I could get on with my meditation. So, I'd encourage you guys to use your telephone number, your billboard, read it backwards to break your emotional states. And any negative state you find yourself in. You might find yourself watching the news and starting to get revved up. You might find yourself talking to a loved one and getting revved up. Use it to break state. So you just see your telephone number, read it backwards as if it's on a billboard up high, nice and high, in color. You can play with it, you can make it flash. And then the next step in emotional state management is while you're looking up, find a place to stare at and hold your gaze, hold your eyes and head steady and stare at that spot. And as you do that, notice all the sounds around you. Notice all the sounds around you, behind you, above you. And as you sit staring at that spot, start to notice the feelings you feel. Maybe the clothing on your skin. Feel the temperature of the room. Feel the fabric of the seat you're sitting on. Or maybe feel the firmness of the floor beneath your feet. And as you start to see everything and hear everything and feel everything, focus on your breathing and notice that your breathing is slowing down. And then focus on your pulse and notice your heart rate starts to slow down. Because now you've broken your state and now you're in this very present state. Being present is very calm. In the very moment we're in, I don't have any problems sitting here. I'm not hungry, I'm not thirsty. My mortgage doesn't exist right here in this moment. It exists sometime in the future and sometime in the past, but in this moment, right here and now, it doesn't exist. So being in this peripheral vision, in this heightened state of awareness of sight, sounds, and feelings in the now is very calming. And then the next step in emotional state management that we shared was using a resource anchor. And so on one of the early sessions, I taught people how to install a resource anchor. And all an anchor is a neurological link. It links your neurology from a stimulus to an emotional state, a positive emotional state. Now, those occur naturally. Those of us who like animals, when we see a puppy, if we're dog people, when we see a puppy, we light up. And so the neurological link is from the sight of the puppy to that happy place. Some of us like cats. And so when we see a cat or a kitten or we hear a cat purr, it makes us feel warm and comfortable. So the sound of the cat purring is a neurological link to a very calm, positive place. Now, your neurological links will be totally unique to you. Some people like the taste of a particular food. Some people smell certain things, and it's a neurological link back to very happy states. My father was from Finland. My mother used to bake certain pastries, and those pastries have a very particular smell. I believe the seed that's on them is cardamom. Anyways, and called Fin Bun. Whenever I smell Fin Bun, I have fond memories of my mom and dad. So that smell is a neurological link back to previous fond memories. And you can install an anchor point. So I taught everybody how to install a physical location, a stimulus that gets you back to positive emotional states. So the 3 steps in state management are: break your negative emotional state by looking up, seeing your telephone number. Step 2 is go into a deep peripheral vision where you see everything in front of you, you hear all the sounds around you, you feel what you feel, and you sense your respiration, your heart rate slowing and relaxing. And then move yourself using a positive emotional anchor into a positive emotional state. So a 3-step process. And then embellishing that or enhancing that, I encourage you to use a breathing technique. Now, there's lots of great TED Talks. There are lots and lots of great TED Talks about breathing. You can see them, they're out there. I really encourage you to look at Wim Hof's work. Wim Hof's breathing technique is now fairly widely researched. And the Wayne State study is really profound. If you're interested in those sort of things, they injected him with a E. coli type bacteria, which he used his breathing technique to initiate his immune system, which he defeated. And I guess they claimed he was a freak of nature for being able to do that. And so he trained some other people to do the same. And so the Wayne State University study on Wim Hof is really powerful. And the Wim Hof breathing method, he has a free app. It's on YouTube as well. It's a beautiful guided breathing. It's very, very relaxing. And so I would add that some sort of breathing meditation as the 4th step for maintaining positive emotional states. My apologies. Somebody just said the email did not go out this morning. So the email announcement didn't go out. My apologies. I'll make sure it goes out tomorrow morning. Perhaps some of the work from home things aren't getting done. All right. So today's subject, I'd like to talk about labels. And then I'd like to talk through labels and into a concept of paradoxes, of polarity between things. And I want to start today talking about labels. We say in our practice that a label is a label of a label. A label rarely serves the person being labeled. We require labels to give meaning to things, but we also use labels to know what to do next. We, the label of a pandemic. So when we go from a disease to an epidemic, there are a series of steps that have to happen. So before the label epidemic can be given, the disease has to manifest itself in certain ways. So the label actually gives meaning to the disease. For it to get to be a pandemic, it has new meaning. It has to meet different criteria to meet in the pandemic definition. And the label also projects emotions, or can project emotions, on the person who hears the label. So when somebody says there's an illness in China, okay, there's a flu in China. In the wintertime, in the northern latitudes, there is flu in every country. So for most of us, when we hear, people in Ontario have the flu, or in BC, there's more cases of the flu this year, it has very little meaning. It has very little resonance for us. We don't start stockpiling. We don't act out in fear. Our healthcare workers, the people around us, may start to take some action as it comes into flu season. They might get their flu inoculations. They might start different protocols, but it adds very little negative emotion, the flu season. Now, if you're immunocompromised, I have some family members who are older and are dealing with some stuff. So in the fall, they get their flu vaccinations. But a lot of people in society don't get flu vaccinations, right? As flu season comes, they that go into it headlong and deal with it as they do. As a flu progresses, if it starts running rampant or out of control, it may get labeled as an epidemic. That label then has a whole new meaning. The disease, the illness, the flu is behaving differently. It's meeting new criteria. But the label also allows the system. We live in a system. You know, we have a government system, we have a healthcare system, we have an education system. We live in a highly rigorously systematized country. Labels allow the system to behave in certain ways. So when there's an epidemic, the medical system, the education system, the government system can start moving and behaving differently with authority. The label then to go from epidemic to pandemic allows international agencies to do different things. And it allows governments like ours to start the provincial and municipal governments to start exercising more controls. Simultaneously, the labels have an impact on us emotionally. And this is a very, very important thing to know, that when we listen to labels, when we are affected by labels, the negative emotions that come with them, that are potentially can come with them, also can have a health impact. Negative emotions, when you read the research back from the 1980s forward on negative emotions and the connection to illness and dis-ease, it's unequivocal that negative emotional states, unresolved negative emotions, have a direct connection to illness and disease. Lisa Feldman Barrett in one of her books says that if you take a bunch of happy people and you expose them to the flu and cold viruses, almost none of them get sick. Expose people who are sad or feeling depressed or feeling anxious to the cold and flu virus, and almost all of them will get sick. And again, you can go into this. There's research studies. Back in the 80s, Dr. Norman Cousins wrote a book called Anatomy of an Illness, where he drew the connections between cancer and unresolved negative emotional events that happen within 24 or 36 months of the onset of cancer. So in these times when we're being bombarded with labels, pandemic, social distancing, words like that. When we listen to doctors who are making gut-wrenching decisions, just by virtue of letting that in, letting all that information in, can have a negative impact on us if we don't manage it, if we don't manage our emotional states, if we don't maintain a positive outlook. And so labels are really, really, really important to know the impact of. Now, we use labels to make sense of our world. That's what I said earlier. In my particular passion with my work, I deal with people who have been traumatized. The medical system, using their diagnostic manual, call it a disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder. And the conversation, the vivid, animated conversation that's happening regularly now is the impact of that word disorder. The stigma that comes to it, the impact on the person who has been labeled. And when you step back far enough, giving the person a label there allows the healthcare worker to know what to do next. When the person comes in and they can't sleep and they're having nightmares or intrusive thoughts, the mental health care worker doesn't know specifically what they might do next. As soon as the person goes through the rigorous psychological profiling and is diagnosed and gets the label, post-traumatic stress, the healthcare worker then knows what they would do next in their continuum of care. Labels are really impactful too. And again, in my world of trauma, when a person gets the label as having cancer, it can be traumatizing. Getting the actual diagnosis of having cancer can be traumatizing. And they start manifesting all the systems of post-traumatic stress. The person who has been labeled starts to. So I'm very, very cautious, and I encourage you to be cautious. I think it's important to be cautious that as we get bombarded with the labels that we're hearing during this pandemic, that we process them in our own unique way and use our emotional state management to look for the beauty, the good, and the other things that are in our society, because they're still there. They're still there. They haven't gone away. Because we're quarantined and we're social distancing isn't going to stop spring. Spring's still going to come here. You know, in Vancouver, they've already had all the blossoms on all the trees. Spring still came. Spring is still coming to your house. If you have daffodils coming up, they'll still come up. And that sort of leads me into a conversation or a subject called the paradoxical unity. Now, this comes from the Tao Te Ching. It's an ancient Chinese study, 2,600 years ago. And the Tao Te Ching, the second lesson in the Tao Te Ching talks about the paradoxical unity. That beauty is only known as beauty because of the presence of ugly. In the absence of ugly, you cannot know beauty as beauty. You will just know it as what it is, as something, but not as beauty. Good can only be experienced as good in the presence of evil. And being can only be known in the presence of not being. And so difficulty is born in the process of easy. Long only exists in the presence of short. Without short, there is no long. And before and after are one. They have to be as one with each other. They can't exist separately. If there's only a big beginning, no middle, and no end, then there is no beginning. There's just is. So we have this paradox and the duality of it, good and evil, beauty and ugly, long and short, easy and difficult, leads to judgment. And judgment comes with its own emotional state. So when we say this is ugly, that evokes emotion in us. So this duality of good and bad. And I hear people talk about how trying these times are and how difficult these times are. And the language we use, of course, is not only how we code our experience, record our experience, it's how we actually experience our world. The language we use is actually how we experience our world. So when we're listening to the media, when we're listening to our friends talk, when we're watching the world around us, the Tao Te Ching would ask us to see the duality as one. That instead of it just being a bad time, bad being a label with all the emotions that come with bad, to see it as part of the whole of good and bad. And that while we're in quarantine and we're social distancing, and some of us are suffering economically, there's a label. Spring's still coming. Spring, you know, in the Northern Hemisphere, it's still coming. And if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, fall's coming, right? And for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, right after spring will be summer. And that's actually a good news story from what I've read about COVID-19. It doesn't like the warm weather. So in the Northern Hemisphere, that might be a good thing. And so in knowing the duality, when we look at the struggle, we also know that there is opportunity. Certainly in the Chinese character for crisis is also the same symbol for opportunity. And so we move from understanding labels, and label can be, well, that's beautiful. I label something as beautiful. I can only know beauty as beauty because I also know what not beautiful or ugly is. I can only know long in the presence or because there is short. And so these words we use are very powerful. And if our focus is pulled in, and I'm not angry at the media, I'm not blaming the media is doing what the media does. However, when we talk about the one side of the paradox, I would really, really encourage you to think about the other side of the paradox. People will talk about before COVID-19. Well, that implies that that we therefore know there's an after COVID-19 coming. And so we can focus on being here, or we can have a balance. We can take in the unity of the process, knowing we're here in the now, in quarantine, knowing fully well there's going to be an after COVID-19 moment, a life that we'll move on. And as tough as it might be economically for some of us, and it is tough for some of us, some people haven't even noticed it. Some people are on salaries. Some people are at home but are still getting their full pay. Some people who are on pension are not getting their pension impacted. So that, you know, if they've lived their life for the last 5 years and are doing very well in that place, their life hasn't changed. They're quarantined, so they're not being. Other people who just started a business or whose business disappeared are suffering economically, but there is an after coming. And I think it's really, really good that using this time to think about what we might do after, what we can do after, and think about it in the duality. If you're drawn, if you're that type of person, and I explained in one of the first sessions, our 3 primary filters that we delete, distort, and generalize. If you're one of those people whose filter is focused on deleting all the good and only letting in the negative messaging, I would encourage you to start looking for the beauty in the world. And you can do that really easily. This may be a task for you to take on if you choose, is as you go through the day, really, really start to notice things that you see that are beautiful, that make you feel good. Now, what might those be? I got home from work last night, and we have bunnies at home, and it's coming to the age where they're 4 or 5 weeks old, and people want to take the bunnies in a week or two. And so my 10-year-old son and my daughter, 6-year-old daughter, my 8-year-old son, and my wife were in the kitchen with bunnies, checking their gender. So they had one box over here with the boy bunnies and one box over here with the girl bunnies. When you walk in and see everybody playing with bunnies and holding bunnies and arguing whether it's a boy or a girl, it's beautiful. It's beautiful to see the children so engaged in with the young animals. It's so beautiful to watch the young animals move in their cage and either go to a brother or father, the male rabbit or the female rabbit, for comfort. So there's beauty everywhere in our world, and I really encourage you to look for that if you're not. A lot of people naturally gravitate that way, but some of us don't. Some of us start seeing the bad in the world all the time. So if your filter, if your delete filter deletes good, I really encourage you to change that filter, if you will, and start looking for the good. Now, hearing things. So many people I work with hear very little in the world except noises, sounds that annoy them. So I would encourage you, just like you see things that make you feel good, listen for sounds. My nephew, Jim, posted a thing on Facebook about the song that they heard at 12 years old, and then a bunch of people replied underneath, right? The song that they remember from that period of their life. And think about a music, a song that really moves you from when you were a teen or in your early 20s. And think about that song. Go play the song. Go play the song, go listen to it. Now and then I do a thing, I go on, I pick a favorite song. So one of my favorite songs to listen to, believe it or not, Jimi Hendrix, Little Wing. And I'll go listen to various artists play Jimi Hendrix, Little Wing. And it's a fun exercise. If you get all the way to Monty Montgomery playing Jimi Hendrix and you love guitar music, that's a thing. That just fills me with happiness. So we see things that make us happy. We listen to things that bring back beautiful emotions. And as you're having those beautiful emotions, you can hold your anchor point. You can install that feeling, right? And then I would encourage you to notice smells that smell good. I happen to have a passion for coffee. I love the smell of coffee. I'm that guy in the coffee aisle who grabs a bag of beans and squeezes it because there's a little wee vent on the coffee bag, and I squeeze it and I smell that bag. And Tara will look over at me and I'll have the bag. I'll be going down the row of coffee beans, smelling all the bags of coffee beans. I can't right now with COVID-19, but so smell things. Smell your meal cooking. Notice the smells of your shampoo or your soap. Just notice the smells around you that make you feel good. Our olfactory sense, our smell, is the strongest anchor, the strongest neurological link to past positive experiences. Some people remember if their father smoked a pipe, they remember the smell of the pipe. For those of us whose father wore Old Spice, if we ever run into Old Spice aftershave, we're instantly drawn back to the smell of our fathers. So, you know, I want to wrap it up there. We've been here almost 30 minutes. Just remember, you have some great tools for managing your emotional states. Be aware of the labels that we're putting on things, and that labels are part of a paradox. If we're labeling something as bad, there has to be something as good on the other side of that paradox. And if we choose to label things, we're in judgment. But if we choose to see something as part of a whole, part of a unity, part of a paradox, a complete, then we can accept it, knowing that the bad times are part of a good and bad continuum. And that there will always be an after. There's a beginning of where we are, and there will be an after. Before and after go along with each other. One cannot exist without the other. And so I'll close on that note. We'll see you again tomorrow at 11. Have a great day, a great night, and see things that are beautiful, hear things that are amazing, smell things, and just notice the good feelings you get when you do that.